Good evening and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence for engaged learning. And my special guest this evening is Dr. Naveed Khan, freshly minted EDD, right?
Yep.
EDD. And so all the information that he has is current and has been researched, and he's the expert this evening, okay? So let me introduce Dr. Khan. It's so good to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Dr. Khan is a former Teacher of the Year who teaches AI, computer science, and music technology to middle school students. He has been teaching for the past 10 years. He is also an adjunct professor for cybersecurity at the college level. He strives to incorporate innovative technologies, instructional strategies, as well as project-based learning in his classroom, and extends learning beyond his four walls. This guy is phenomenal. He's a great guy. So, AI, what is AI, sir?
So AI, we all know, stands for artificial intelligence, but the long and the short of it is that AI is, if you took everything that we have available, the entire sum of human knowledge available on Google, and we give it a voice. That's what AI is, because we can interact with it. It gets smarter the more we interact with it. It can connect the dots better. Billions of human beings are using it on a daily basis. Some of them have replaced Google with AI. So instead of going to Google, the first thing they're going to is ChatGPT. I am one of those people who, for a lot of things, I'll go to ChatGPT. But AI, no matter what company it is, what brand or whatever AI you're interacting with, it's all the same neural network. And so they're pulling from the database of all the knowledge that's out there, everything that we have on the internet. And that is essentially what we and our students are dealing with AI.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for defining artificial intelligence for us. So now, how about AI literacy? What exactly is AI literacy?
So AI literacy. So one thing, if you teach technology or if you're in the tech world, the goalpost will always keep moving. And that is just the nature of the field.
Okay.
So as a technology teacher myself, a computer science teacher, what I've seen over the years is we'll say, and if you think about other subjects, let's start with other subjects first. So we think about the word literacy, we're thinking language arts, being able to read and write and comprehend what you're reading and writing. So that definition can translate over to AI, being able to use AI the right way, being able to understand what its purpose is, being able to use it for the reason that you need, whether it's classwork, a project, an assignment, and be able to use it the right way, ethically. So in technology, instead of the challenge here is like language arts, we know kids need to read, write, comprehend, and those things will not change, right? The strategies might change, the approach might change, but the skills will not change that we need. Same thing for math. The numbers won't change, multiplication, addition, it'll always be there. But with technology, as a technology teacher, you have to understand that it is an evolving field. That is the nature of it. 10 years ago, they might have said every child needs to learn how to code, coding literacy, right? That was the focus. But now, the focus is more, ever since AI has come out, we've seen kids start using it. We know that they're going to use it. If they're using it, we need to train them to use it the right way, okay? Because if they're using it the wrong way, which is what we see, they're copying, they're just wholesale taking college level writing and dumping it into their work and turning it in and thinking that's okay. That tells you they're not literate. They're just trying to get a quick answer. Kind of like we used to go back in the day and go on Google and just copy what we found, right?
Cliff notes.
Cliff notes, read the Cliff notes, right? So they're doing the best they can, and you have to like give them credit for their ingenuity and like their desire to even do the work and try and get a good grade. But when they do things like that, you can tell they don't have an understanding that we know that this is not your work, right? So they are lacking that AI literacy. However, if you're in the classroom, and I know these questions will come up later in the interview, but if you're in the classroom, I believe every teacher's job is to, one, learn how to use AI themselves, and then two, be explicitly teach your kids. This is how you use it in my classroom. This is how you should use it. And we'll give more examples later, but you've got to train the kids. Otherwise, it's just the wild, wild west out there.
And that is important, to be explicit in instruction. I have posters in my classroom about when students can use AI, when they, like how they're supposed to ask, and even if they do use AI, how they're supposed to evaluate their work, because it goes through the practice test. But like you said, we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. So engaged learning, we know that basically is how students make sense of their work. They connect to real world context, and the students take ownership of their learning. So it's like collaborative work and things like that, where the students might work in teams to design a community project, or perhaps they reflect on their process, like in language arts, how they arrive at their answers. So we want to find out how we connect AI literacy to engaged learning. How do we do that?
So define engaged learning for me.
Okay.
Well, how would you define it?
Well, it's active, collaborative work that the students are doing. They're working in groups. They're trying to make a connection to the work. They're actively learning about their learning.
Okay.
You know, that's what they're doing.
So depending on the subject you teach, but just wholesale, we can use AI as a tool. And so I view it as an assistant, almost like another tutor in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I train my kids, you can use this thing, for example, a lot of my students, because of language barriers or English is not their first language, they struggle with spelling, punctuation, capitalization, grammar. Like they're using texting language, right? And they think that's appropriate. They don't really see what's wrong with that until you point it out to them. Now, for them to sit there and in the 6th, 7th, 8th grade, trying to teach them all of that when you only see them 2 to 3 times a week in like a technology elective, that's difficult. So what I try to do is I try to give them that tutor, so they have an AI assistant available. And the one I use in particular is Magic School, which is a great tool. Has a lot of free features, but the kids know that they can go and click this link and it's available every single day for them. And they can go in and they can use it to check their own writing. So they can dump their writing in there and this thing will check their spelling, grammar. But not only will it correct it for them like ChatGPT would, it will explain it because it's built for education. So just a shout out to Magic School, but their AI does a great job of knowing that it's working with kids and it will explain to them, here's why you should capitalize these letters, here's why.
So it's not just going to change
right.
the language of it, it will actually give like a breakdown of...
A breakdown every time. And you can even tailor, so with AIs and large language models, you can go in there and you can tailor it to interact in or respond in a certain way to your students. So like I have it responding where no matter what the kids ask, provide a short explanation, provide a breakdown. And it'll do that naturally, but if you give it the guardrails ahead of time, then you kind of created your custom model that they're interacting with. So that's one way. And that way you're not getting, as a teacher, you're not getting the same question 30 different times. You're not seeing the same typos and spelling errors and all that 30 different times, right? Or 100 different times if you think about all the classes we teach. And when it gets into other things like project-based learning, engaged learning, where the kids are doing tasks, they're doing higher level things, they're building things, that's where you can use AI to have them generate images, which I've done, have them generate artwork for their projects, because not every kid is an artist, right? Yeah. And so you want to give them an option there, give them some choice to use the tool in a way that's meaningful, right? That, I can't draw, but I can generate some artwork and put it on my project, right? And then also, as far as project-based learning, again, it can be available. Have one kid has a computer and they're the one who's like, they have the role of AI expert or AI whatever you want to call it, AI assistant. And so that kid in that group project can be the one who's checking over things with AI or using AI to make the project better.
So everybody has a role, so you're not really just a passive participant in the learning process. I like that. Because then, that you kind of touched on it already somewhat, because the next part I want to talk about is like high impact teaching practices. That would be how you deepen the students' knowledge in their learning and also their experiences, so that they have like a richer learning experience, being engaged with what they're doing. So do you utilize e-portfolios? Absolutely.
So I've actually just started. I've wanted to do it for years, but I was like, how much work is it going to be on me and the kids? And so now that I'm teaching music technology, I decided to kind of sneak it in there, and I love it so far. So the kids have, from day one, well actually day 2, whatever, they've been able to go in and on Google Sites, they've created a portfolio. And this is something that is an ongoing project grade and a test grade for them each month. So each month I go in, I'm going to check it and I'm going to see, do you have everything I asked you to have in there? Do you have appropriate spelling, grammar? Again, with this AI assistant you have available, your stuff should be on point, right? And so they're adding to their portfolio daily. And they have a quick little assignment, like we explored careers in music technology. Go pick a job, right? You want to be a DJ, look up the salary, tell me the responsibilities in your own words. Make sure, again, your spelling, grammar, all that is on point because you have an AI thing to help you. It shouldn't be off. And then that portfolio grows throughout the year. Every day they know this thing is there, I'm adding to it. Unit 1 has a page, unit 2, 3, 4. So when they get done with this class, it's not just a one and done class. If I get you next year, you have this portfolio, we can keep adding to it. If you go to high school and you want to take this class, you can show your high school teacher, here's my body of work, you know? And even things like, you know, in music tech, they can create what they used to do a CD way back in the Stone Age, right? So you could burn a CD and your kids have a CD of tracks they've made. Well, this year we're gonna have like a little YouTube playlist where they have their beats that they've made and it's on their portfolio. And that way, if any of these kids ever go and make it big, and I'm sure some of them will, then they can look back and say, this is where it started. You know, these are the beats I have. Okay. Because even me, I still have my beats from SoundCloud from way back in the middle school days. So they need to know that the internet is a good way to, you know, have and store your work and have this body of work in your portfolio that you can always go back to.
I like that it's a way to scaffold their learning as well, to just so that they can see where they started from and they can pretty much monitor their own progress, and it's not too much on you to try to explain, well, this is what you did wrong. What you see the representation and you can see the continuum of the students' progress, their growth as they go along. So I think I did an e-portfolio when I was in undergrad and I saw the value of it. I really enjoyed it. And I think it was through Microsoft or something like that. I kept that program somewhere. So I think that's a valuable thing. So how do we help teachers then to maintain academic integrity though, while they're using AI with high impact? I know that you mentioned like Magic School, but then how about those students who kind of like, well, I'm not gonna follow these rules that you have right here. I'm just gonna go ahead anyway and still do my own thing.
And so I think it comes out in the wash, because those kids, you'll see their writing is on a whole different level, right? They're magically writing at a college level in the 6th grade or something. So I think it kind of it points itself out sometimes. But I monitor my kids on these apps that I'm sure most districts have, where you can monitor the students live, see what they're doing on their screen, get a reportable websites they've accessed and things like that. So that's one way. You've got to check over your kids. You've got to check their work. A lot of times I'll have them just show me live. Like if you say you're done, I tell them I've heard that a million times over the past decade, right? And 9 times out of 10, if a kid says they're done, they're not really done. They think they're done, right?
Right.
And so you go and I'll go and I'll look at it and I'll eyeball it and I'll say, okay, well, you could work on this, you can fix this, this is off, right? And so 9 times out of 10, they're not done, right? And so they need to go back and revise their thinking and their work. And also, you have to call them out on it. So if I see a word like...
Good old-fashioned call them out.
Call them out, right? So, go over to them, they say they're done, right? And you see a word like audaciously, right? And this is a kid who's never used this kind of terminology in their day-to-day life, right? These are the kids who say, you know, bruh and 6, 7 all day, right? And so these are the kids you have to, you know, call them out, and you got to say, you know, what does that word mean? Use that word in a sentence, right? Because it's on your portfolio. Yeah. And I've had this happen already in the first week of school, you know, and kids will say, they'll look at me and they'll say, I don't know what it means. Right. And I say, okay, so where'd you pull it out from? The air, right? Did your friend tell you? Do they know? So they'll say, no, I just, you know, I got it on the internet or I copied it. And I'm like, okay, so that's what you need to change. You're not done, right? So checking over kids, same thing before AI. If they copied off Google, we knew. We had to tell them fix it, you know? And then also, I always say this, formative assessment. You have to check over them, give them a quiz, give them a test, give them something to see if they really know what you need them to know, right? Right. Because if you're just saying do the work, anybody can go copy off the calculator or the AI or whatever and say I'm done. But let's do some live assessment. Let's do some, you know, some real performance-based assessment even. Can they do that thing or that task in front of you? And I also used to do articulation tasks, have the kids talk, you know, because if they copied off AI and they don't know how to pronounce audaciously, then that's not their word, right? You know, that's not their work or their words. And you got to just have different ways to assess them and catch them on the things like that. You know?
I think that's very important to emphasize that, you know, like the computer, when we did not have Chromebooks, people were actively teaching and monitoring and ensuring. I mean, you had different levels of instructional practices that were going on. People who are being great teachers were being great teachers, and people who are doing otherwise were doing otherwise. So just because we have a Chromebook in front of students does not now mean that, well, it babysits and it's the solution to everything. There's still they could have been born into the age of technology, but it doesn't necessarily mean that these students are computer literate, that they are literate with technology, that they know exactly how to use it. Most people only use 5% of the capacity of their phones anyway, speak less of the computers that they have. So as with AI, as Dr. Khan says, is like you have to still, as the instructor, you still have to monitor your students. You still have to check. You still have to evaluate what they're doing. You still have to take them through the steps of learning, even though it might be done a little faster right now. But you still have to go through the steps, which is very, very important. So the next question I have would be about if there are any collaborative projects that the students have done across different maybe contents that they have utilized AI and that you have experience with. Have you done any of those projects?
So it's a little difficult to do interdisciplinary as an elective course because everyone is in class at the same time and sometimes they're really far away. But I've always pushed for it. Now what I have done, what I can speak to is I've had different classes interact with each other. So for example, we used to have multiple computer science classes. We used to have the kids use AI to create a poster, a flyer about a job, a career in technology they were interested in. And then they would have like an AI image of themselves in the future working in that career. And then they would have, all their information. But then they knew that wasn't the end. They had to present this information. And so they would present it to the class next door. The class next door would come in, they'd walk around, they'd ask questions, it'd be like a little job fair. And we found that prepared our students, especially our older students for, our 8th grade and our 9th grade students here. It prepared them for the actual job fair that we have every year. And they were more inclined to go and talk to people and ask questions and be confident because they had the practice of doing it a month before, so we'd like prep them in advance and things like that where they're using AI, they're building something, but they know they have a performance piece tied to it. And that was part of their grade is, are you actually interacting appropriately with your peers? Are you actually making eye contact? And do you know everything that you put on your poster that AI helped you generate, right? It's not just AI's words. You got to tell me what
you have to take some ownership of what you're doing.
Yeah, what an app developer does or a video game designer developer does. And if you can't tell me and the kids who come up to you are like, this guy's not making sense, then we know that your work, is not really your work. So again, things like that where they know, I got to go present this live. I know that there's an accountability piece. I got to go talk to the teacher about this. You have to articulate and show that you know what you've done. It's not just copy paste off the internet,
I like
Google
that.
Off the cliff notes,
Yeah, I like that. Having the students to articulate their thinking and to actually present live in front of others, it lends a whole lot of validity to what the students are learning. When we're talking about students who might have special needs, ADHD, autism, dyslexia, giftedness, do you have any of those student populations that you teach?
Absolutely, I have all of the above.
Okay.
All of the above on this multiple choice test.
Okay, so we know that there are people who are neurodivergent, they have different abilities and all of that. So how does AI literacy intersect with neurodiversity in the classroom? How does it help?
So I don't know if this will be controversial, but I think we're all neurodivergent. I think you and I think alike.
Absolutely.
Or think different. We think alike.
Yes.
We also think, great minds think alike. But we also think very differently in some ways, right?
Yeah.
And I think every single kid you have in your classroom is going to think a different way.
Okay.
Or they're going to have their preferences. They're going to have the ways they like to do work, the ways they like to submit their work, or I want to do this, I don't want to, write, I want to do a video, I want to do audio, whatever. So you're going to have kids. I think every single kid is diverse in a different way. Neurodiverse, if you want to call it. But then of course you have your identified autistic students and your dyslexic students and things like that, and gifted and ESOL students and things like that, And so what you have to do is, I think AI is almost an equalizer. It can level the playing field in some ways. So special ed students, I've noticed, they benefit a lot because their grammar and their spelling and all that might be more difficult for them. If I have dyslexia, that's going to be difficult. But the AI, even if you're typing wrong, if you're a dyslexic student, the AI can pick up on that and still figure out what you're trying to say and still correct it.
Okay.
So things like that. Also allowing them to use different inputs. Like if you let kids use on-screen keyboards, I have some students like that. They don't want to type. They're not the fastest typer in the world. but they can click fast and they'll click on an on-screen keyboard, and they'll interact with the AI that way. They can also record their voice. You can also talk live to the AI. As far as language barriers, I have students who are able to interact with the AI in Spanish. They just press a button, it's in Spanish, talk to it in Spanish, verbally, type it, whatever you have to do. It'll translate for you, it'll do all those things. So I think AI can definitely level the playing field for our students who are either need some acceleration, enrichment. As far as the teacher, you can use it to create tasks for your gifted students. So if they're done early, say I have this standard we're working on, I needed to create something to keep these kids busy or give these kids some advanced learning. And it'll help you with things like that. So as a teacher, it can help you address your neurodiverse population, but also for students, if they're using it as a tool, I think it can get every kid a little bit of what they need, you know, because they're all interacting with it in their own way, in their own preferred way, and I think it can give them exactly what they need. So almost like a personalized tutor in the classroom, I would say.
Do you use the same tools for your standard classes as well for those students who
Right,
have?
so all of my classes are mixed. I don't have standard classes. I have a mixed bag in every class. And so I get a little bit of everything. And I was having this conversation the other day with a teacher. I think that's how I think school should be, because sometimes we'll segregate our kids, for lack of a better word, and we'll put them in this team with the other kids who don't know English, or we'll put them in this team with all the other special ed students. And a lot of times, what I've noticed with elective classes, students will benefit from being in a classroom where they see, as we said, neurodiverse, everything. You see the real world, you know, because when you get out in the real world, college,
That is true.
College, high school, but also college, you know, you're gonna see a little bit of everything. You're gonna see different ages, you're gonna see different abilities, different disabilities, things like that. And so we can't, you know, shield our kids. You don't know English, you need to be over here and not interact with any English speakers, you know, throughout the day. Or you have autism, you need to be in this. And there are, you know, not saying there aren't benefits to having them in the classes getting the services they need, but at some point during their day, I do believe they should be in a mainstream classroom, a large group full of a little bit of everything. And that's what they'll encounter in the real world.
We were just talking about this as well in my ELA classes. We're talking about the autobiography of Frederick Douglass. And we just kind of like, you know, are drawing the tangents that come along with it, where you had like multi-level classrooms back then because education was so segregated.
Right.
And we talked about the purpose of public school and how it founded and things like that, where public school was designed for linear thinking and not necessarily divergent thinking. And so one of the things that came up in conversations, like, why is it that every single class has students who are pretty much roughly about the same age, and all of them about the same ability? And one has to go back and look at the history of public school to understand why we have grade levels and why it's like this. Whereas what you're talking about, where we could have multi-age classrooms, or you have students with diverse abilities and everything, it exists in a Montessori school setting, which I feel is what the world looks like. You work with people who have different abilities. But you know what? Let's not get off track. Let's come back over here since we're talking about.
I was just about to give you more points.
But I know. Okay. Well, go ahead.
Well, just real quick, you know, I've seen peer leaders in action, and so when you bring an older student down to a younger classroom, they're able to lead the kids and serve as a role model.
Right.
And similarly, even in my classes, I have 8th grade and 9th grade students together. And even though it's a 1-year gap, sometimes a 2-year gap, that can make a big difference, because now these 8th graders will see how 9th graders act and behave, and they have a lot of role models to, you know, emulate their behavior and act a little more mature, because now we have older students in the classroom. So it just benefits to multi-age as well, I think.
Okay. So one more question in this department is like, how can teachers design AI supported activities that would reduce cognitive load for these students who may be neurodivergent, ADHD, you know, autistic, or who might have like difficulty or challenges in cognition? Okay, how can they design activities that reduce that cognitive load but increase accessibility?
So another great tool is Diffit, DIFFIT, and it also has free teacher accounts for some features, and they're able to generate differentiated worksheets. So You can address whatever population you have in front of you. You can have enrichment, remediation, acceleration, all of the above. And so that's one way, because we know a lot of times it's hard to go off one lesson plan, one uniform lesson plan that everyone has cooked up.
Yeah.
But you're looking at your kids and you're like, my kids are here, or some of my kids are here. And we all have, some diversity among our levels in our classrooms. And so you don't want to spend all day creating 3 different lesson plans for 3 different groups and 3 different levels. You want to have AI kind of take that workload off you. So not only is the student's cognitive load reduced because now they have what they need at their level, your cognitive load is reduced because you're not at the school until midnight working on 3 different lesson plans, So we've got to reclaim our time as educators. That's a big thing, I believe in.
Absolutely. Okay. This has been enriching. I really enjoyed this. I think we have like some other conversations that have stemmed off of this that we need to have. Okay. I do have some other questions though. So if teachers, educators who are listening, something else I have said is about prompt engineering, which is what I kind of focus on a little bit, because for that, the student has to be versed in the content. How do you think that plays into AI literacy?
I think the more students interact with AI, the better they get. But you're absolutely right. Like if they don't know the content, they're not even gonna know where to start. Sometimes they don't know what to ask. So as a teacher, one thing I've noticed that helps is almost like sentence starters. You've got to give them some prompts. You've got to say, and I've done this in the past, where you give them a list of 10 things you can ask the AI to get started on your project. Because we as teachers know what we want the end product to be a lot of times. But you have to think, how am I going to use the AI tool to get my students from point A to point B to point C to where I want, And so as a teacher, you have to be intentional about letting them know this is how you should use the AI for this project. This is some 5 starting prompts you can ask it that will give you, this is what this will give you. So you don't want it to be the wild, wild west, right? If they're just on there and they're just typing away and they're getting, they might even get misconception. So if you know about AI, it hallucinates, right? And these hallucinations are misinformation, false information. So we want to keep our kids away from that as well. And I think that's us, the human element in there, guiding the students to where we want to see them go.
Okay. I think you answered the question I was going to ask about how can teachers take one small step to build AI literacy into engaged learning. Like really just being intentional and being explicit and letting the students know exactly how they can use AI. I have some posters that I'm going to post a link to that you can have in your classroom, because those are really going to help with teaching the students, and also will provide guidelines also for the teacher on how to use it and how to teach those. It's pretty easy and your students can reference them as they go along. So, other question I have, how can teachers continue this conversation and build communities of practice around AI literacy?
I think you have to take what's in your classroom and you have to help those teachers around you. So you can't live in a bubble because your kids go into all these other classrooms. And so I know my kids come from every team in the building, every level, every neurodiverse group. And so what I try to do is equip my students first, and my students hopefully can take what they learn in here with the use of AI and apply it to other classes and other subjects. But also, it would be remiss if I did not go with all the wealth of knowledge I have and spread it to other teachers. So if I'm just sitting and I've got all this knowledge and I'm hoarding knowledge, that's not benefiting the school or the community at large. So I believe in going outside my 4 walls always. And whether you're leading PD for other teachers, you're doing short video clips for them, here's a tool you can use, here's a new tool I found, here's how you can use this, here's a project we did. We talked about interdisciplinary, go and work with other subjects, see if we can do an interdisciplinary project. You and I share the same kids or something, we can try out something like that. So I think a lot of times, it's sad to say, but you see classrooms are in isolation. Even sometimes teams of teachers in middle school are isolated. Kids go from language arts to math, science, social studies, but those teachers are not talking to each other, and those kids are not collaborating across those 4 subjects. But I think the most success I've seen is when teams work together to create project-based learning that is combining multiple subjects, letting students from different classes interact with each other, And just going, not being afraid to take a risk. You have to let the kids get messy sometimes, and you have to let them learn, because we can't, when they get in the real world, they're going to be using AI, they're going to be using all these tools that we're talking about. They might have something even better. They might have 3D holograms that follow them around or whatever, So we have to, again, it's ever evolving. So you have to, like I told my kids today, we were learning about the moon and space tech. I said, I'm going to go teach on the moon when I'm 100 years old. So I said, I don't know about y'all. And that really, I think, got some of them thinking that, we're living in a time where anything is possible,
Absolutely.
You couldn't even imagine some of the things. So like, I'm talking about the Artemis mission, they're going to the moon next year. And I told them, I said, y'all are on Instagram and TikTok and TikTokstagram and whatever you have. You need to go watch this moon landing live, because in 10 years, you might have a chance to go visit the moon. You might have a chance to go live on Mars, things like that. So I think we should always keep them curious and push the boundaries, because they're not always going to be in our classroom. They're here for a blip of time, and we're trying to equip them with all this and get them ready for a world that is changing way faster than we've ever seen it change. And I think AI has really, in some ways, it's forced us to bite the bullet.
Absolutely.
Because it's here, and it's not going away.
Yeah.
And it's like, either you're getting with it or you're getting left behind, right?
Getting left behind.
And after AI, like I said, there might be some other technology and something else. So you have to constantly be willing to evolve, change, take risks. And that's education. We're here to help kids learn. We can't just, we're learning, we can't just flood their brain with information anymore. They've got access to all the information in human history. How are we going to prepare them for the new world that we're seeing? So that's our mission, as profound as it sounds, but that's what we're doing in these classrooms every day out here.
I like the fact that, how you said, we can't be in a bubble and we can't be stagnant, because AI is changing, and we're either going to get with the program or get left behind, because this thing truly is evolving very quickly. We can resist it, but it's almost like how you have people in the Stone Ages where they were still carving stuff or whatever, and then somebody came around with a better method and was like, no, I'm not going to do it, but here we are. Here I am talking to you, we're recording, whereas maybe 100, 200 years ago, this was not possible. So we have to embrace it, we have to learn it. As educators, it is in our space, there's nothing we can do about it. So this is why these conversations are important, and they're vital for us to have. Like you said, go out and share what it is that you know, just as we're doing right here. And we're gonna continue the conversation, because we are going to be teaching, and these children are going to be leading the future. And so why don't we just set them up for success?
And you're talking about cavemen, got me thinking. Like I got AI. I've invented fire over here, and you're scared of the fire. Exactly. You want to stay out in the cold.
Yeah.
Okay, you stay out in the cold.
Exactly.
I'm gonna be out here in the cave with the fire.
Yeah.
So you just gotta adapt and evolve. That's what it is.
Absolutely. Well, I've enjoyed talking to you this evening, Dr. Khan. I hope to have another conversation with you very soon. And thank you so much for tuning in. Guys, if you have friends or so, Instagram has a new rule. You got to have, over 1,000 followers?
And we're going to get there real soon.
We're going to get there real soon, so we can do these for real live. But thanks for joining us this evening. Take care and see you next time.